shoes, everything she says is true. If you don't know now, you know. All you ever gotta say is heard that, heard that, heard that, heard that, heard that, heard that. Look, all you ever gotta say.
What's up, Heard That Nation? Listening in the United States and around the world, you are now listening to the Heard That with Marisa Tigney podcast. If you happen to be watching right now on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button so you stay in the know of every new episode and guest that I have on my show. I'm honored to have this guest on here, how we connected through the world of sports. I am now part of their amazing world. He is a co-host on, I will say it out loud on this show, one of the hottest YouTube shows that comes on every Tuesday night, Def Texas and Sports Podcast. I'm honored to have him on the show, Geoff Long. Welcome to the Heard That podcast.
Thank you. And you are the queen of DTS. So, we got to give you props. You've definitely made the show so much better, and glad to have met you, and you are part of a family. So thank you.
I'm honored. And we'll talk about that in the backstory on how that all came to being, the Def Texas and Sports Podcast. But you and I were talking before we got on the show. There was some breaking news that came out, and they'll definitely will be out by the time this show drops, of the legend that we had lost in the National Football League of Jim Brown, passing away at 87 years old. Jim Brown, to me, was more than just a football player. He was an icon. He was a trailblazer, did a lot for Black history in the 60s with Martin Luther King and Lou Alcindor, that became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, and those that spoke up and spoke out for the treatment of Black people. And his legacy is going to be one of those ones that I think many people around the world, not just people of color, but everybody from Cleveland Browns fans to those that knew him in Hollywood, him being an actor. What does his legacy mean to you?
He is, a trailblazer. You have to think at the time of when he was playing in the 50s, 60s time frame when, Jim Crow segregation was going on. He fought for equal treatment of Black athletes, but he just didn't speak it. He talked the talk, but he also walked the walk.
That's
and
right.
He continued to do that after his football career was over. And he definitely had a good relationship with LeBron James, right? He was also a mentor for him. And he just a trailblazer. That's just really what it comes down to. And it's just, that one really hits my soul, because as an African-American myself, there's just no words to describe.
As a Black man, especially those that are in sports, and not even in athlete, but just in all genres of wherever you're at, to the blue collar worker, wherever they live, to, someone that's well known, like you mentioned, like a LeBron James, and those that he stayed connected with. It wasn't just football and just the game. It was that he was setting the example and the precedence of knowing, especially for Black men, representing who they are and, taking a stand for themselves.
Exactly. And, there's still some examples still to this day of good Black athletes that are paving the way, but Jim Brown is one of the first original ones, right? He's kind of like an MLK of sorts, but of sports. Like he has had that type of impact, and his legacy is going to continue on 200 years from now. And when you think of civil rights within sports and equality, Jim Brown is on the Mount Rushmore, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think he is, and I would say, one of the top tier heroes of many people that have watched his career and then, later on hear about his career, and he's in history books and everything. And so let me ask you connecting with sports, I'm sure that, I don't know if you had played sports as a young age, or, how did that connection of sports, your love of sports, come to you? Was it because of a team? Was it because of a coach? Did you play sports?
Believe it or not, it was actually a woman that got me into sports. It was my aunt.
Okay.
Yes, Lisa Long. I have to give her a shout out. She was the reason why I love sports. She played for Vivian Stringer, one of the legendary coaches at Iowa back in the mid 80s. So I had to give her a shout out. She was always a big sports fan, loved sports. And we would just sit there, and I would just remember being like a 4 or 5 year old kid, just like sitting on our lap, just like, watching NFL, watching Monday Night Football, watching NBA, and watching Lakers when Eddie Jones was there back in 1996, 97, Nick Van Exel. So believe it or not, it was actually a woman that got me into sports, and she actually coached me in sports. She coached me in baseball. She coached me in basketball. She even coached me in football a little bit too. She was just like that role model for me. And yeah, it was actually a woman, believe it or not.
That is fantastic. Wow. Shout out to your aunt. That's awesome to hear. And with sports, and we have talked about this so much, and we're getting to the show Death, Taxes, and Sports podcast in a moment. But with sports, there's such a connection to it. Whether you played for a little bit, whether you're just a big fan and just watch, it in all genres, it brings people together. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
And if so,
Yes.
what's an example for you of the connection that you have felt with people, fans or coaches, that sort of thing?
Like I think about, like, for instance, I think about, because I have a lot of family from like the New York area and
Mhm.
I'm a big Yankees fan. And I think about 9/11, for instance, right?
Mm.
And you think about how games were canceled for a little bit. I think I was like 12 years old during that time. But I
Mhm.
remember when George Bush went out to throw the first pitch, everyone was watching that moment,
Yeah.
right? And it just gave people a sense of pause and to be able to reflect on what's really important. And it being America's pastime, but just also bringing people together and to be able to forget about all the craziness that's going on in the world, right? Like
Mhm.
that's an example of it. But I just think like altogether, sports is entertainment, but it's just an opportunity for us to just be able to escape from the realities of life, right?
Yeah.
When you're watching a game, you think about the crowds, you think about the noise. I mean, just even the game last night, you could feel the atmosphere, you could feel the energy, how
Mhm.
people in the city of Denver really want that championship so bad, right? Because
Mhm.
it can really just bring a city together and put all the troubles on pause for a moment just to celebrate that one moment.
Yeah, and it's awesome to see that, especially, you don't know who's sitting next to you, the person in front of you, everything else. And the beauty of sports itself that just brings people together. And you have no idea if the person is your neighbor or you just met them like 2 minutes ago and everything else, that
Right.
you're rocking the same jersey as they're rocking. You're considered family. Even the ones that are like Lakers fans. The awesome thing to see intertwined in the audience there was, even though it was such a close game, it was such a back and forth battle, both sides of the ball. It was the fans. It's just watching them being fascinated with how many of them, I'm for this team, but I'm for this team, but somehow they just intertwine and
Right.
connected.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, it's just like the camaraderie, like being
Hmm.
a diehard sports fan. It's almost as if it's like us being diehard sports fans. We're kind of
Yeah.
part of like a semi fraternity of sorts, fraternity
Oh,
or
that's good.
so
Hmm.
we're right. Like
Hmm.
I would say that it's like it's just like a bond where it's like we spend so much time reading about it. We
Hmm.
spend so much of our lives consumed in it. And when your team is winning or when your team is losing, or even when you're at the barbershop or when you're at the hair salon, you're like, man, did you see that? Did you see that game? Like, yeah, man. Or did you see, Aaron Rodgers missed that pass? Like, yeah. And then you just talk about it for hours and hours before you know it.
Yeah.
You've been having a conversation with a complete stranger for 2 or 3 hours. I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of like a fraternity of
Do
sorts.
you feel, Geoff, that the sports figures, again, us growing up and seeing our heroes on TV, or even having that privilege to see them live, baseball or hockey or basketball, do you feel now there's a sense of vulnerability with the athlete, with the players, meaning that, I don't know, to me, because of the events that have gone on, the COVID year, the pandemic, 2020, so many of these things, Black Lives Matter. Do you feel that the athlete, what I'm trying to phrase this to the point of the connection piece of them. I just feel that sense that the vulnerability, that it's not, the fan versus the athlete, it's the fan and the athlete that have joined together. If that makes sense of, some.
Yeah, yeah. I think with today with social media, and I think social media has allowed athletes to be able to connect with
The
the
interaction. That's
fans.
what I was trying to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would say they've been able to do that a little bit more, right? And I think that there was always a hunger and a thirst for that even back in the 70s and 80s, even when
Hmm.
Magic Johnson was playing.
Hmm.
But because there wasn't the type of technology that enabled them to be able to control their own narrative, They
Yeah.
had to rely on public relations departments. So now you have athletes that are able to control their own narratives. They're able to go on Instagram Live. They're able to go on Twitter. They're able to put up polls and say, "Hey, what do you think if I did this? Or what do you
Hmm.
think if I do that?" They can do
Yeah.
podcasts now. Like Draymond Green, for instance, he has his own podcast.
Hmm.
It allows for him to be able to create his own narrative and to be able to create his own, I guess, side hustle of sorts, where you're able to get to know him more on a personal level. So I think it's really just
Right.
the technology these days.
Absolutely. And that's such a great example that you brought about Draymond Green, because it could be right after a game, shower and does this press and everything else, where he just grabs his microphone and his, setup and just goes right into, what went right in the game, what went wrong, him getting suspended, him getting the flagrant. Like, he's just transparent, the transparency of Draymond Green. It's just like, okay, I hated him during this game, but somehow he's becoming likable to me because he's becoming relatable to me,
Exactly.
to a certain extent on that platform.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's important that these athletes do this more, because we forget that these athletes are human. And
Yes.
you think about the Be Like Michael Jordan commercial back in the mid to late 80s, right?
Hmm.
It glorified him to a point of where you thought he was invincible and that you thought that he could do no wrong, right?
Right.
And then when he did do something wrong, right, you're like, wow, like, he's a human. Well, no, duh, he is a human. So I think if anything, I think athletes need to do this a little bit more, so that people realize that these athletes are not immortal figures, like we have like internalized these guys back in like even like the Bob Cousy's back in the day, right?
Mhm.
They were seen as legends, and but they're legends, but they're also humans, and we have to remember that, especially with like the whole mental health situations that's been going on.
Yeah, speak on that a little bit, because I was going to ask you about that. Now that there is a name to the issues of the mental, of the mind, because there's a lot that is put on that athlete to perform great every single night, or every time they step into the mound, or every time that they get their skates on the ice, or whatever sport they're in, men and women. Speak on that, and give me your opinion on how you feel now the whole mental health movement is for these athletes, from a fan's perspective, when you see it, when you see them speak about it, or they're involved in nonprofits and everything. Has it evolved in the way it should be, or should there be more?
I think they're going in the right direction, but I
Hmm.
think more needs to be done, in the sense of the NBA and the NFL and the MLB really having mental health campaigns in the communities and really talking about it more, right? They, like, the NBA has done a phenomenal job in doing different seminars for athletes on how they can handle their money, how they budget their money, right?
Yeah.
But I think they need to do the same thing with mental health, because I just got to mention the whole John Moran situation, for instance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, go there
He's
with it.
23. He's 23 years old,
Hmm.
and you have to think that he played at Murray State, didn't play at a big time university.
Hmm.
Now all of a sudden he's thrust into the spotlight. He's 23 years old. He has more money than you can even think of,
Hmm.
and he's the face of the franchise. And I'm not making any excuses for what he did, because it still was stupid.
Hmm.
That was just dumb. But
Yeah.
you have to think of the type of pressure for. Imagine who you were at 23 years old.
Hmm.
Like 23, me at 23, I was lost. I was
Yeah.
going from job to job trying to figure out my way. And now this man has millions of dollars and he has the world on his shoulders. Like,
Hmm.
that could affect you mentally.
And
I mean, don't you
balancing
think?
out the opportunity to launch his brand, expand on his brand, and a young father. So all of that being in the spotlight, while trying to, young fans are looking up to him as a hero of sorts. So he's got all of that to balance. I
Yeah.
wanted to add to your point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, I mean, and again, I'm not saying what he did was right, or that I'm trying to justify what he did. But just imagine where you were in life at 23 years old,
Hmm.
and with all of that on you. I mean, that's just, I just couldn't imagine. I mean, that's just from a human, just being a human, like that's just a lot. So I pray he gets his life together, but he I don't know. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of those pressures when you have the one and dones of these athletes that have a phenomenal year, and they're like, all right, I'm ready to declare for the draft. I'm ready to go. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the college ranks in college football, I think they have to play 2 years, 2 or 3 years,
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, 2
2
years.
years. And then, and for college basketball player, it's 1 year. And then if they feel like they're ready to go, then they go, and then we talked about on the show that I'm honored to be a part of, Death, Taxes, and Sports podcast, which we'll talk about in a second. But we had one of the topics that we talked about was the transfer portal, and how that whole thing is I hate to say it, but literally it's been out of control. And we talked about it in depth about how some of these colleges have used it to its advantage, but many of them have not used it to its advantage. And it's become a big old mess because what you and myself and the other two co-hosts, Ben and Gary, we'll be on the show and then we're getting alerts about so-and-so's transferring to this college, or they, going to this college, or, they decommitted and they're going here. It's just so much of that. So talk about, give your opinion about the transfer portal, because you brought up several good points when you had talked about it on a previous broadcast when we were discussing it.
Oh man. So I first want to say that I think that college sports, it's been beneficial in the sense that, hey, athletes have the ability to own their college career a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been a big fan of, okay, you transfer, you have to sit 1 year. That never made any sense to me. And
Right.
it never did.
Right.
But I look at the situation in Colorado, for instance, and I look at the high turnover. And
Colorado football.
yeah, Colorado football. They
Mm-hmm.
did. He has brought in 60 new players, 60. Oh, and that is the biggest changeover in all of college sports.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to produce quickly if he's going to do that. But I think it needs to be regulated a little bit more, because
Mm-hmm.
now it's starting to become free agency now.
Mm-hmm.
And college sports is not professional sports. Like, there's still that amateur aspect of it. And I think that it needs to be regulated a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, they need to limit the number of transfers that they can do a year or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just getting really, really out of hand. And I think it's starting to taint I'm a really big fan of institutions, right? We talk about institutions, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really tainting the institution of college athletics.
Do you feel that the NIL has something to do with what you had just said, the taint of the institutions?
I think the NIL has something to do with it. And again, I think that I'm glad that people are making their money. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert. I just think it's just getting a little bit out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's become a little bit too much. That's just generally just what it comes down to. What do you think?
My thoughts of it is I agree with you exactly. I was happy when the NIL did pass. My concern of it, as soon as I got the alert that it did pass, I'm going, okay, this is going to turn this portal and people and these athletes transferring on its head. I said, this is going to be insane. For example, my college that I love near and dear, University of Michigan basketball team, we lost a commit that transferred from North Carolina that was committed to Michigan. And then I read in the details that it had something to do with the NIL process, that he decommitted. And I don't know if he's going back to North Carolina or wherever he ended up. We lost our big man, Hunter Dickinson, left and transferred to Kansas. And in his words, he had said it was because of the NILs and an opportunity that was at Kansas was the reason for his transfer. So that right there, to me, when I'm looking at NILs in Michigan being a great university, why is these players that are really good, big time players that can help their teams, and Michigan had a very rough year, why are they fleeing when the opportunity of an NIL that was passed and for them to stay and to get paid for their name, image, and likeness? That's what NIL means for those that are listening and watching. We're losing players, big key name players, and not just Michigan, but other universities, other colleges as well. I mean, that's a catch-22.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a very sticky situation.
I think that, I think in just all of college sports in general is being a big pivot, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about NIL, you're talking about the transfer portal. Now, I'm not sure if you read about the whole ACC situation, where they're talking about the amount of broadcast rights of money that they're losing, right? I think that they're losing $30 million more over a 6-year span versus SEC schools. So it's starting to have it's starting to have them starting to think about realignment. Like, I just really think that I just really think that college sports is going to just become a farm system for pros. And I don't think that it's going to be, I think that it's going to lose its mystique, right? That's what college
Yeah.
sports has, the mystique. And I think it's starting to be tainted a little bit.
See, I like this conversation that we're having because one of many conversations that we do have on this awesome platform that Geoff is a part of, that I have been honored to be invited to, as well as our other two co-hosts, Ben and Gary, and shout out to them on our podcast that is on Tuesday nights on YouTube, streams live, Death, Taxes, and Sports podcast. Give the backstory, if you will, Geoff, on how you became a podcaster, and you're brilliant, may I add, and how all of that came together between you and Ben and Gary before I joined on.
Yeah, it was something that Gary and I have been friends for years. We go back to 2007. We were in sports management classes together in undergrad, and we'd always been big sports fans. Gary and Ben and I met him 3 years later, 2010, both big sports fans. And I always wanted to start a podcast, but I mean, I was just lazy and I didn't want to do it. But then I just approached Ben. I was like, let's just do this, right? Like, we're going to hit some bumps. We talked about it. We're just trying to figure out a name, like what the name was going to be. And we're going back and forth, probably like a good 4 or 5 months back in 2021 before we started back in February 2022. And Gary just said, you know what? He actually came up with the name Death, Taxes, and Sports. He texted both of us. He's like, I got it. Death, Taxes, and Sports. So like every title would be Death, Taxes, and such and such. And we just had to figure out what it is that we wanted to talk about. And we just really just kind of kept it with some of the major sports. And, and it's just been, it's been a great ride. When we first did our first episode, it was terrible. The sound quality was bad.
Yeah.
We tried to do covering the Super Bowl, and I'm sitting there trying to edit it, and I'm just like, well, we got to redo this again. This was bad. Like, the sound was terrible. But yeah, and then ever since then, it's been great. And then we always wanted to add another co-host. I think it was important to add a female touch to it, because I think that it brings another element. We were just waiting for the right person, and we had you, and I was like, she's it. Marissa. Like, your sports, you're passionate about it, you bring a different flavor. So yeah, and then you agreed, and here we are, 83 episodes later, year and a half, and just still going strong. So again, glad to have you on board.
I'm honored to be on board, and I like the topics that we do touch on. It's not just one genre, where it is the NBA, but I believe that and let me know if you agree with this. I believe we touch on the topics not only that are trending topics, that are hot topics, but also those that are in, those that matter. So we, talk about the NBA, we talk about NFL, we talk about NHL, we talk about the WNBA, the upcoming season that's happening, the events that are going off the court, talk about a little bit about golf and different contracts and everything else. I like the variety of the things that we do talk about. We get the feedback from the listeners that appreciate that we're not just, just one sport or two sport conversations, that the conversations we give, and again, we're fans, all four of us, we're fans of the sports itself, and we go through, and literally when we're not on the show, we're texting each other, watching the games live, giving our feedback, giving our opinions, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, or this person, faked their flop and they're soft and they got a technical foul for, the air knocked them over. We're giving opinions, even though we could be done with the show. We're still texting each other about how we felt about the show, but watching a game at the same time and everything else. So I just like that bond, that what we have accomplished in, my short time being there, and in enjoying the conversations that I have with you three gentlemen, is that, it's sometimes it's just more than just sports. We are four people. I have not met you three yet in person yet, and I look forward to that day. But I feel like that I've already met y'all, and I've been connected with you all for a while. And I like the fact, part two of that is that it's more than just sports, that, we start the show off before we go live and talk about, how's your mental, how are you doing? How's your well-being? And I think that connectivity for all of us, we connect that with the audience. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think that it's like, we're people at the end of the day, like it's, I think that just in general, we have to, if you're not well, then you're not going to be well on the show, right? It's like when I'm a manager, if you're not well, if your wellness is not good, then you're not going to, then
your audience will feel that.
Right, right. So that's why we took that break, because we know that, there's just, hey, let's just take a breather. Let's just take some time, refresh, recharge, and come back. I mean, you have your life. I know that you've had, some things that have happened in some life circumstances. And that's why we wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about it, because I mean, your family, your friend, and we're just not here to just talk always about sports. We're also here to talk about the things that impact us. So
Yes.
definitely I agree with you on all those sentiments.
I appreciate that. And again, it's an amazing show. Again, Death Texas and Sportscast, a sports podcast. Y'all and Geoff will drop all the social medias for everybody to follow at the end of this show, because you definitely want to check us out. I think that we're, on the rise, and it's an amazing show, an amazing platform. I got to give you a couple of grief things though, for the NFL. Just, that we just had the draft. Your team is the Denver Broncos, and the schedules have just been released a few weeks ago. And looking over the schedules, I want to know your opinion on how well do you think your team is going to do now that you have, Sean Payton at the helm. Are they going to let Russ cook? Is he going to cook correctly, or is it going to be just burnt over, burnt plays and things that went terribly wrong last year? Where do you see your team ending up? How many games do you think they're going to win? And part three, who is going to give you all a challenge looking at your schedule?
And I'm just pulling this up here because I'm like,
I
so
can
we
I
got
can
the
I can tell
Cardinals.
you a couple of them.
Yeah, I mean, we got, honestly, I just don't know. I mean, there was so much hype and expectation going into this season. And I was actually at that Monday night game when they played
Mhm.
Seattle, and everyone was like, oh man, you guys are going to blow us out, blow us out. I was like, just let's just see what happens on the field.
Mhm.
I think that we're going to be better, because I think that a lot of those games that we had last year was
Mhm.
due to lack of proper coaching. Nathaniel Hackett couldn't hack it, and some of the decisions that he was making were terrible.
Mhm.
We have Kansas City in two of our in the first half. We played them twice, so there's going to be two losses. We're not going to beat Kansas City. Um,
I mean, looking at October, your October schedule is loaded. Like, I'm like, if anybody wants to rank toughest to, toughest schedule to easiest schedule, you all, I think, are in at least the top 10.
yeah,
To go to, the Bear Country on October 1st. Then you go back home and you got the Jets, the newly crowned
yeah,
former cheesehead, meaning Aaron Rodgers. Then you go to Kansas City, Arrowhead Stadium, and that's a nighttime game. And then you got the Packers. God knows what's going to happen with them and who's going to lead their team. Could be Jordan Love, who knows? And then you face the Chiefs again at home to bookend pretty much your October. And then it doesn't get any easier. The beginning of November, you have that bye week, and then you go and you play at the Bills. That's a pretty tough schedule. Like that
yeah.
meat part of it, the middle part of it, the meat of the sandwich. That's pretty tough.
I'm just gonna say, like, 9 wins. I think 9 or 10 wins can get you in a wild card and get you in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can see us getting 9 wins conservatively. I'm gonna say that because I think that we're gonna win some of those games just due to better coaching, because it's
Yeah.
not always about the X's and O's, but it's also about understanding situations, when to go for it, when to not, when to punt, when getting better field position. And I think our defense is still going to keep us in a lot of games. We're
Mm-hmm.
loaded at wide receiver. Tim Patrick is coming back. I
Mm-hmm.
like the backup that we got, Perrin from
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati, who I think is a great #2 option behind Javonte Williams.
Yep.
I think losing Tim Patrick was big. Now we got the Luce, who's that tight end that we have, who's in
Mm-hmm.
second year. So I think offensively we're in a better position. So I think that we can win 9 or 10 games. I just don't know
Side
which
note,
ones.
side note, y'all don't want that smoke December 17th. I'm just letting you know that right now. Y'all don't want that smoke. Y'all don't want that smoke when you come to the Motor City.
You know what? I will even put a wager on that game. We can put a little bet. It only have to be
Done.
monetarily.
Done.
We'll think of it. But hey, I'm rooting for you guys, just not when you guys play
Yeah.
us. How you feeling about your Lions? So talk to
Listen,
me.
I
How you
feel good
feeling?
about my lines. I'm really excited about them. I'm looking forward to when they come here to Dallas, and that's at the tail end of December. I've already, when the schedules came out immediately, it wasn't Lions fans that was blowing me up. Shockingly enough, it was Dallas Cowboys fans. I'm surprised Ben didn't hit me up. Talk about the December 30th, which is a nighttime game, mind you. It is a Monday night game. The last Monday night game of the season is Lions at Cowboys. And I love the appreciation now that my Detroit Lions is getting now with 5 nighttime games. Last year we had none. None. They gave us all noon games with the exception of one game being moved and postponed. And then we had a nighttime game. And then we told Aaron Rodgers he can go somewhere else. And now he's not. So his last loss in a Green Bay Packer uniform came to the hand of God's team, One Pride, the Detroit Lions.
Hey, I'm a big Amon-Ra St. Brown fan. I'm a big fan of his. He is. I mean, he's big. I just wonder about that running back you guys drafted. I don't know. Like, I just think that his ability to be able to run between the tackles. I know there was a lot of scouting reports with that, and I hope that he can stay upright. But I'm really rooting for you guys, man, because I mean, your quarterback was number 1 overall draft pick for a reason. I mean, the man is not a scrub. He's talented. I think you guys can win the division. I really do. I'm going to say that. You guys are going to win the division.
I was really surprised that we went with a running back, Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not taking anything away from him. He's amazing talent that came from Alabama Crimson Tide. Those that are listening, Roll Tide to you. That's the only time I'm going to say it. I was just really surprised in seeing his reaction live when we picked a running back. Like, he was surprised. His family was surprised. He thought he was going to go later on in the first round, but to, fall as early as he did. But hearing out of camp that he is doing well, I'm curious to see, how he's going to do. They're going to put him in preseason and then going into the regular season. When we already had our weapons of running backs, we'll see how it goes. Yeah,
I mean, I just think you guys can score points. I mean, there's no doubt. It's just on the defensive side. I mean, that's that's really the thing. I mean, there was one game where you guys won, or it was 52-48 or something like that. I remember that. I was like, man, just imagine if they could just make one
tightening
stop.
Up that defense. Yeah,
just one. And I really thought that they the focus of the first round should have been on defense, maybe a cornerback but I mean, hey, I still think you guys are loaded. It's just unfortunate with Jameis Williams. I think Jameis Williams, is that how you pronounce his name? Jameis, the receiver, the rookie.
Oh, Swaggy, yes.
Yeah, is that?
I was Jamal Williams. Yeah, I was bummed about that and how that worked out, and then hearing his words, and then the Lions organization on his contract, and now New Orleans has him. Good luck to him. I don't wish any ill will. I know some fans were very salty about the fact that he left and the way he left, and then throwing shade on the organization that took a chance on him after he came from Green Bay. It is what it is. It's a business. It happens. People that, athletes, they want their contract, their agents get involved. They want, max contracts or whatever it is. And it doesn't work out. They move on to the next, and that's what the fans have got to do. Change happens, whether we like it or not. We're losing that big player, that key player, coaches change, all that. It's the nature of the beast when it comes to any business, not just in sports, but in any business. Change happens, whether, and risk is always involved for the good or, for the bad. It's that nature of the beast. It's a part of the business.
Yeah, I'm also trying to think that rookie wide receiver that you guys had. He tore his ACL in the national championship game. He's suspended for 6 games.
Oh, yeah, Jameson Williams.
Yeah, Jameson Williams. That's what I was talking about. Yes. Yeah, I was really excited to see what he could do for you guys.
I really was. I was too. And again. And, you and I and Ben and Gary talked about that when it came to the rules, how tight they are, and how much the rules have evolved so much on what you can and cannot do, and the involvement of not just the NFL, but the NBA, what you can get away with. And I think I had mentioned it on the show, especially in the NBA, where, you had, Boston and Los Angeles, and somebody was always throwing an elbow or punching someone in the face, or, my boys literally were the bad boys, Detroit Pistons, Bill Laimbeer, he was flying elbows, either you leave with a black eye or a concussion because he was just throwing them elbows everywhere. Versus now you have flagrant 1, flagrant 2, technical foul, not just the technical, but you have so many intricacies of a foul that can lead up to a suspension, or, so many that you can get leads up to multiple suspensions. And then, we had talked about load management. So it's just so much that has evolved. It has evolved in the pro sports today.
Yeah, just the whole betting thing. I mean, it's I guess the integrity of it, but like if
Yeah.
you're at home and it's legal in your state and you have an app, like I don't, as long as you're not betting on an NFL game, I don't see the big deal about it.
Hmm.
But I just feel like the NFL is just kind of, I feel like they're very also
Soft.
they're 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 control freaks. I'll just say
Hmm.
that they're control freaks. They don't like to pay their players with guaranteed contracts, and they
Right.
are control freaks. Enough said.
I agree. I agree. Before I let you go, a couple of things I want to ask you about, and one pertaining to the amazing show, again, Death, Taxes, and Sports podcast. Where would you like to see it go? We a year and a half in, we connect with the viewers and those that are watching, and you have a core following on Twitter, a really good base of people that will connect and see what we're talking about, and we discuss things on Twitter before our show and after our show and everything else. Where do you see this show going as a whole?
The one thing I want us to do is I want us to do a live show in person.
Yes.
That is my goal. My dream is for us to next NFL draft. Like I really want this to happen. We are
Hmm.
at a bar somewhere. We actually have a podium. We have a stage, and we do a
Yes.
live show covering the first and second rounds of the draft. Like that to me, I think would really be able to really put us on the map to do an actual live show, because I don't think a lot of people
Hmm.
actually do that because people are so used to doing it virtually.
Hmm.
But whether we do it in Dallas, whether we do it in Boston, wherever,
Hmm.
that's the number one thing. A live show at least once a year where we all meet and we do like an hour and a half special, and we bring different guests on, we
Hmm.
bring different coaches. That's really like the number one thing that comes to mind.
And last question for you. Favorite sports memory that you got to be a part of where you watched the game live, or yeah, if you were able to watch the game live and it was like the most epic moment or
Oh,
epic night or day of your life.
you know, it was actually last year when I went to the NBA Finals in San Francisco. I had always wanted to go to an NBA Finals game, and I just
Mhm.
said, you know what? It's on the West Coast. I was living in Phoenix at the time. I was like, I just got to do it.
Yeah.
And it was just the whole experience. The seeing Stephen A. Smith and seeing Michael Wilbon, like just seeing them live, like on the screen, just while they're doing it live,
Yeah.
just being that whole atmosphere, and just being in that new arena, just to feel the energy of it. I mean, there's nothing like it. That I'm not gonna lie, it made me kind of a pseudo Golden State Warriors fan. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna say that just a little bit. It was just, I mean, it was just a great experience. I mean, just from beginning
Mhm.
to end. And I've been to a lot of different sporting events, but I would have to say going to that NBA Finals game last year was definitely tops on my list.
That's awesome. Where is for you? I'm gonna follow up with this question. I know that's the last question. Where is it that you would like to do or where to go next as far as a sports event
I've
that's on
been,
your bucket list?
I mean, I've been to a World Series. I've been to an NBA Finals. You know, this might sound weird, but I really want to go to either Wimbledon or go to the Monaco Grand Prix. Like those are two iconic events that I would love to go to, because they're just a different type of atmosphere, different type of energy
Yeah.
outside of just like your regular NFL game. I mean, I'm a
Mhm.
sports nerd in general, and I appreciate sports history. I would have to say I one of those, either Wimbledon or a Grand Prix in Monaco.
Spoke it out and it's now out there in existence, and it's going to happen for you, Geoff. How can people stay connected to you and follow you and the show?
So you can follow us on Twitter. We have our Twitter page, DTS Sports 33 on Twitter. And we also have our Facebook page, Death, Taxes, and Sports. You can look it up. You can follow me, Geoff Long, Geoff Long, LONG 33 on Twitter. Always welcome to interact with people, and we always are open to bringing people on the show. And we'll eventually get on Instagram. That's the next thing. But
Yes.
look out for more information on that. We'll get the Instagram.
The big thing is we're gonna be coming and doing a live show soon. Geoff spoke it out in the atmosphere, and I agree with him. It's gonna be happening very soon. We're gonna make it work and we're gonna make it happen. And I'm honored to call you family. I'm honored to call you friend. And I thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Geoff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you. And
all those that are watching and listening, thank you so much for tuning in today. And as I always end the show, take care, stay safe. We out of here.